Welcome, Mariah Coz, to the Purpose and Profit Club podcast. I'm so excited to have you here and join us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. It's so good to see you. I'm very excited for our conversation today and to see where it goes.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to say is the way that you talk about money, purpose, and profit is why you're here. It's something my entire audience needs to hear. It's something that coaches and consultants and nonprofits need to kind of flip it on their head. And that's what I'm so excited for you to bring in, because I think you have this like pioneering way of like, just because we've always done it this way doesn't really mean we need to continue doing it this way. So I just want to give you that.
To fix what's not broken. I love to get in there and be like, just because we've always done it this way, maybe there's a better way, and just go ahead and break everything that ever existed.
Exactly. That's the name of the game. And I just want to walk you through like me as a case study in working with you. So I looked this up this morning, and I first learned about you back in, I think, now I'm going to get it wrong, April or May of 2020. Okay. I believe it was a Facebook ad for one of your online summits. And I was like, boom, I'm in. And I had no idea about the Mariah Coz, anything. And I was like, this looks cool. I'm in. I think it was a very low ticket. Yes. I don't know, under $20. And this is
that would have been like our first virtual conference. And the only reason we had to do it was because of the pandemic.
That's right.
We had to do a virtual conference. But I think that was when a lot of people found out about us, because I was like, well, I guess we're running ads now.
Yep. And here's what I love is I paid you, low ticket, $20 or less, attended the conference. And then I checked 4 weeks later, I made a 5-figure investment, an investment I had never made that amount, not even close in my business. And I love that because I think there's a huge lesson there. One, I'm not a unicorn. I'm pretty probably typical and normal as a client in your world of like low ticket to high ticket. And two, for so many of my nonprofits and so many of my service providers, we sort of decide what we think people can and cannot afford. So for example, if a donor gives $100, an organization very, very often thinks that's their giving capacity, right? If I pay $50 for a workshop, I would be very easy to think, well, maybe I can get them up to $100 for something else. And I love the idea of, no, that's not true. Our job is not to decide what people can and cannot afford. So I love that.
Right. Just give people options and meet them where they're at. Give people multiple options. That's what I love about, especially when we're talking about charging like a higher ticket price point, offering a higher touch, higher ticket type of program. If that's something that you do in your business, a lot of people will say to me, well, I want to have a big impact in my business. I want to help a lot of people. And I feel like if I charge this higher ticket price point, then I'm turning away people who aren't ready for that yet, or who can't swing that financially. I completely understand that. And that is very real. But that doesn't have to be your only offer. And so for us, it's really helpful to have yes, is there a higher ticket program if you're ready for that, and if you're the right fit for that, and if it's financially feasible for you at the time? Perfect, that's for you. But having multiple offers at different price points to meet people where they're at. And for us, the big part of that question of, well, how do I serve thousands of people at a really wide level while also serving a handful of people at a deeper level in the high ticket program? For us, that was the virtual conferences, and continues to be our virtual conferences, where we can serve thousands of people for a $19 ticket, and we over deliver. We just go all out for those. And that's our social impact sort of arm, where it's because we do have a profitable, more premium program, we're able to really pour into and over deliver something for $20, just like we would for $20,000. And that's where we're able to give back in that way. So for anyone who wants to have that, I really I love the idea of serving people in a deeper, more high touch way with a high ticket program. You can do both. And the numbers and the data say that we have so much data that just shows the magic that happens when you do both. And just you're an example, Christina, that's where a ton of our clients come from, is they find out about us from a $20 workshop. And then maybe a few weeks later, maybe a few months later, they do eventually work with us in a higher ticket, more premium capacity. And yeah, we just like to over deliver the whole time.
Yes. And I'm like nodding along, just profusely thinking like, you get to have both. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be just low ticket, just high ticket, just one-on-one, just one to many. Is like to think of it holistically, right? As
why not use all the tools and strategies? This is what I've been saying, especially the last few weeks. I've been, a lot of people have been coming to me being like, what's working right now? Like my thing that was selling last year is not selling right now. Like, what should I do? And I'm just like, why would you be so strict in what you sell and how you sell it and the one price point? And like, you get stuck in this like dogmatic, little box. But why wouldn't you allow yourself to use all the tools and strategies at your disposal? Why wouldn't you be like, yeah, I have something that's $200 and I have something that's $20,000. I have something for you here. I have something for you there. Like, why wouldn't you want to meet people where they're at and just use all those strategies and tools to be successful?
I think that we have like something I've been thinking a lot about is this idea of like rear view mirror thinking, which is like, we're just like, but that thing worked last year. And so I'm supposed to replicate it and repeat it. And I'm supposed to just do that. And that resistance to like, it's okay to like change it. It's okay to do something new. It's okay to try something new. I don't know. And I feel like there's a lot of people who have some resistance around that.
I've gotten really stuck there too. Like I think I talked about this maybe in a recent podcast episode on my podcast where because things for us worked so well in a very specific structure, in a very specific way through 2020, 2021, the beginning of 2022, everything was like, this is how we do it. This is the price point that we rely on. This is the structure of everything. This is what has worked so well for 2.5 years. Like it felt like as the CEO and as our team grew and our company grew, and I felt really like responsible for, not messing things up, because now you have a lot more people relying on you and your company to provide for them. And I obviously take that very seriously. And so I definitely got stuck in that for a while where I was like, I can't change it. I can't experiment really, which is hard for me because I love to experiment and do new things. So I felt really stuck. I felt like I had to keep doing things this way, the way we had done them for the last few years. This is how it works. And so in the middle of 2022, I've talked about this before, when we did our sort of typical virtual conference and it didn't go as planned. I know most people would experience that and be like freaked out, be like, oh crap, like what are we going to do? I felt free. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm free, because like, yes, I love that strategy. I'll continue to do it. Like we're going to do a whole new themed one this year that I'm excited about. But there was a part of me that felt like I've been so stuck in this cycle of like, this is what we do. This is how we do it. Rinse and repeat. Don't change anything. This is what works. These are the ads that work. And it wasn't as creative as I like to be very creative and very experimental. So when it stopped working in that instance, I was like, woohoo, we get to do whatever. I get to like make up new stuff now. And I was really excited about that. But I've definitely gotten stuck in that trap of the rear view mirror of like, well, that's what's worked before. You really got to be, I mean, that's entrepreneurship, is like, you have to be willing to just kind of like throw it out the window and be like, what have I got to lose? Like, and sometimes you have a lot to lose. But
that
like,
little nudge though, that little nudge that you felt, that was just like, I really want to do something creative, but I have to keep doing this thing. And it's like, I know I felt that in my business, and I'm thinking of like a relationship breaking up, and you're like, thank God the person broke up with me. Oh, I didn't know how to, and like it's almost like that, where it's like this relief where you're like, oh, I didn't know how to get out of it. And so it was like a relief around, this isn't working anymore. Now I get to go be free and create and an entrepreneur again.
I love that. That's a really good analogy. Yeah, it's totally like that. It's kind of like, oh, I was never gonna stop doing something that was working so well, so easily. So
I needed something to like disrupt it.
It'd be like irresponsible. Right. Literally, that was what I told people. I was like, it'd be irresponsible for me to like change things right now because they're going so well. And so many people are benefiting from it and my team is relying, like, there's no point. But yeah, then you get the opportunity to really like shine in your innovation and your actual entrepreneurship, which I love.
Yes. And that's where people are most attracted to you. And that's where the biggest profit comes in. So I want to talk about your podcast, which, yay, synchronicity.
Yeah.
It debuted on the same day this podcast debuted. And I was like, that's my Tuesday and Thursday listen. So go to the Mariah Coz show. Episode 10, I think, is today's episode. And that is where you give your behind the scenes, your story. So for all my listeners that are like, wait, I need to know more about Mariah, go listen to that episode, because you're spilling. Yes.
Because in that episode that went live today, I literally said at the beginning of it, I was like, look, I go on tons of other podcasts and every single podcast asks me to recount my entire life story every time. And I'm just like, I don't want to just say it over and over again on every other podcast. So I was like, I'm recording this to be the go-to listen all about it.
I found myself on other podcasts, I'll whittle it down to a sentence, which just isn't that interesting either, to be like,
but you're just like, I can't keep saying this over and over again.
Exactly. But I did love, I think it was one of your earlier podcasts, you were talking about the idea of wanting to do the podcast, which is really like wanting to do any kind of content or any new strategy, and then getting stuck in the idea of like, well, this is the same thing I got stuck in. I should have it on YouTube. So now I need to be ready and have everything And then finally I was like, Christina, fucking minimum viable, Christina, like just get it out there. And I felt like that is something I learned from you for sure, which is the version that's 3 years down the road is not the version of today, but you've got to fucking go. Like you've got to do
it.
The thing.
And that's literally something I said in the podcast that goes live today. I was like, you can't compare like my 8 years in version, super optimized, like everything has, like, I've been doing this for so long. You can't compare that to like your first version and be like, why doesn't mine look like that? Or like, why didn't I get those results? Or like, why didn't I? It's like, it's literally so different. And if you saw how messy my first drafts of everything when I went live with them, they're so messy, so rough, such minimum viable. Like if you only knew, then like I hope that you would be inspired to like be like, okay, it all is going to start kind of messy and scrappy and it can get better later. And it's frustrating I do think that when you have the vision for what it can become, it can be really frustrating to be in those initial scrappy stages. But just go through it, live through it. And what's funny is once you get to the most polished version of your thing, whatever it is, program, product, podcast, whatever it is, you'll look back and like fondly be nostalgic about the scrappy beginner days, which I totally feel now.
I got an email from Eventbrite and it was like on this, 4 years ago today. And it was like a cute workshop that I created on Eventbrite. And that was like my ticketing platform or something. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. I'm like, oh, that was my minimum viable. Like that was my first.
Exactly.
I didn't have, so yeah, it is like, I just got it done.
I mean, and that's the thing is like, we've had content systems, like in terms of doing the podcast too, like we've had content systems that required like 6 individual different people to touch the piece of content so that it could get published. And that's what you're talking about, where I was like, I don't want to do that again, where it's okay, well, Mariah records this piece of content and then it goes off to the video editor and then it goes off to the podcast editor. Those are 2 different people. And then it goes to the graphic designer who's going to add X, Y, and Z. And then it goes to the social media manager and they're going to cut it into these little clips. And then they're going to create quotes from it and they're going to blah, blah. And then it's like, and then it goes to the tech admin who's going to upload it and publish it and write. And then it goes to the copywriter who's going to write all the descriptions. I'm not kidding you. It took like the way we did this in the past with the podcast. And I think part of the reason I was like, took me a long time. We took like a 3-year hiatus and it took me that long to come back was because I was like, I definitely just don't want to do it that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to syndicate to every single platform. I know how to do that. We've done that before. It is technically smart, but it's not necessary. And it was definitely holding me back. And I just remembered being like, just so y'all know, everyone listening, free content is not free. Like it would cost us, I think we calculated it would cost us around $1,500 to $2,000 per podcast episode to publish. Because like I said, I'm paying a copywriter to write the descriptions. I'm paying 2 video editor and a podcast editor. I'm paying a graphic designer and an admin and like a social media manager. And all those people do their little bit of it. And then like it's crazy. It's like so much bloat and so much extra work. So now literally it's like, I sit down and I record an audio only. I don't even do video. I just record audio only and I upload the raw. There's no editing. I just upload the raw file into Libsyn and that is it. That
beautiful.
Is it. It takes like 10 minutes.
It's beautiful. I love it. Yes. Minimum viable. It's so good. There's so many, this lesson can be applied to like any content, period.
Totally. Any platform.
Yes. So I want to shift gears and I want to talk about this idea that you were the first person to really talk about in this way, which is the 4-day work week. And I'd had a few other like maybe coaches or just like folks on the internet I knew that mentioned the 4-day work week, but the positioning was always this. It was, I'm CEO and I work 3 days a week. I'm CEO and I work this. And it was me. It was just the me, right? Yeah. And what was very clear is that everybody else in the company was just working their normal 40 hours or whatever it took. And you were the first person that was like, so our team is now doing a 4-day work week, and you brought us along for the ride and gave us some peek behind the scenes. But the first question I have is why shift to the 4-day work week, and why for all?
I think there's also a lot of lessons too so we introduced this, I guess it was in 2021.
That sounds right.
Like it was, I think June of 2021 was when we introduced the 4-day work week and told, obviously I had to tell all of our clients, like, we're not available on Fridays anymore and all that. And so we restructured like this client support and just expectations and boundaries and stuff like that. And I think we were definitely getting to the point where it's like a year and a half into the pandemic, everyone's like, I would like to go outside more. I don't want to be on Zoom all the time. Now that's gotten to like a very extreme, like now I could, like our new thing is like asynchronous everything, like no calls, no Zoom, nothing like that. But I think at the time it was just like, we can, as a team, like we can trust that we can work less and create even better results. And like, let's just trust that. And we just were all kind of like needing, I think, a more balance after, 2020 and the first half of 2021. So going into that summer, it just felt like I know that a lot of people would do like summer Fridays. And so going into that summer, I was just like, no, this is just the new thing. And so we definitely did it. At first, it was just Fridays off. I do think there's something to be said for giving people the option. Like some of our team members would have preferred, we had to start somewhere. We had to start with some parameters. It's like everyone has Fridays off. Like that is no longer a work day. But I know some people would have preferred like it ends up being a 32-hour work week. And I think some people would have preferred if it was a 32-hour work week that they could spread across 5 days. But just when we first started it, we were like, we're going to see how this goes. And then we can make it more flexible. Now it's more flexible where people can kind of spread it around, but we still are off. Like Fridays are still what we call a quiet day, because when we introduced the 4-day work week, we also introduced something called quiet weeks. And I can talk about those if you want, but Friday is still like quiet Friday, where like there's no communication externally. People can choose to allocate their hours differently if they want to. But yeah.
I feel like it's so interesting because as entrepreneurs, I've been an entrepreneur since 2007. I'm like that. But what's really interesting is I, like so many entrepreneurs, created a business that just mimicked corporate hours, corporate everything. And I was like, well, obviously I'm supposed to work 9 to 6. And it wasn't until these last few years that I was like, no, I don't. And then ultimately I realized that I can work less hours and watch revenue grow and like start to kind of break those pieces apart. But that takes a lot of unwinding and unraveling.
Yeah. And we did it too. Like even I feel like the 4-day work week thing was like a great thing that we did. And in terms of like applying it to the whole team, I just like literally cannot imagine. I can't imagine telling people that I'm doing a 4-day work week and they're not. Like I would never say that out loud.
But listen,
I just can't imagine that reality. But I guess if some people are cool with
Here's how it comes up. Here's how it comes up in my head. And maybe you're just like, no, it just doesn't work that way in mine. Is the salary that you're paying people, the full-time salary or whatever, you're still having to reconcile in your brain. Well, now I'm paying them that same salary. Obviously, they're not getting a pay cut for working less because their output is the same. They're still producing. But I feel like we were brought up to believe like you get paid for time. And so that's what I feel like you really pioneered with this, is just this idea of like, I believe in my employees enough. I believe in my team enough. They're going to get shit done. And this is actually going to be better. Like, this is going to be better for them. This won't be at the expense of anything. So unwind that for me a little bit. Like, and for anyone else that's listening, that's just like, wait, how, what?
No, I think there's definite, like, I just really came down to trust and just being like, I know that this is going to be really good for all of us. I think we all need like more rest. I think we all need, we need to operate the company, but we need a bit of a break. I think we need to like, I was like, if I was ready to do it, and I knew that if I was ready to do it, then everyone else was ready. Cause I would have been the last person hanging on and being like, no, like we have so much to do and I have so many projects I want to work on and blah, blah, blah. But I was like, if I'm ready for this transition, I'm sure everyone else would be thrilled. But I think we've done, like you said, you start your own business, and then you kind of, because you don't know what the alternatives are, you just kind of like replicate a lot of things. And that definitely happened to us as our team grew, and you just don't have any other resource, like, as your team grows, and then you're like, oh, okay, I have to like figure out how to run meetings. Like, how do corporate companies run meetings? And then you're like, okay, how do like performance reviews work? And then you're like, how does manager communication work? Or like, what are I don't know. There's just so many things that as we grew very rapidly and hired very rapidly, you're kind of scrambling, being like, what do you do with all these employees? Like, how do you manage them? How do you, and so you default to like, and we definitely did that. We read, you read all the typical books about management and corporate structure, and you're reading these books that are really written for like way bigger corporations and companies. But it's like you default to that, where you're like, well, this is how, Apple runs their meetings. And then you're like, why are we doing this? Like, there's no, this is like, who are we? Who are we trying to be? And so I think it was it was last summer. I remember posting something on Instagram or something and being like, we just eliminated like every single structural piece of like management and like corporate structure that was in that we had just adopted because like, what else you don't really know what else is there. And we just like, we got rid of all manager, like we had no more managers, no more structure like that. There's no hierarchy. There's no like totally overhauled like performance reviews and like the idea of all that, just so many things, meetings. I mean, we just continue to get more and more and more asynchronous. So we just really,
how did that feel when you did that?
I mean, it was really scary because I was like, I don't know, if this is going to work. And I'm sure, and I was like, I can understand why people use those structures. Like, they're helpful for some people, but my brain, they're not super helpful for my brain. And unless it definitely, when you have a company like that and you have all those structures in place, I definitely felt like you essentially need a full-time enforcer, and that there's a person on your team who's an enforcer, and all they do is make sure that people are filling out their reports and checking into their things and doing their, performance reviews and filling out their forms and blah, blah. It's like, you just have an enforcer who's like doing that stuff all day and doing all these and like prepping and running all the meetings. And that's like all they do. And I was just like, it's gotta be
everything about like your tone.
Let people just like talk and do their work. Like, why does it have to be so structured?
Everything about like your tone and just your expression right now is like, and this isn't the business I want. Like, this isn't it at all. I was just like,
why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're like, can't people, and there's so many interpersonal dynamics where people would be like, it's like, you have to go to your manager if you have a question about this. And it was creating like silos where I was like,
Yeah.
well, why can't you just go to the person in that other department who does that thing? And they're like, no, I have to go to my manager first. And then my manager will go to her manager.
Jesus
They'll
Christ.
talk about it. And then the manager will hand it down to that person. And I'm like, you could have just messaged her. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
when it gets to be like that, I was just like, this is not, this is not what I imagined for myself.
Yeah. Yes. So let's talk a bit too about asynchronous work weeks or work days, because the first time, and maybe I just lived my whole life without hearing this word, but the first time I had ever heard it was 2020. My son was like in, I don't know, kindergarten, and they were like, we have asynchronous learning. And I was like, I don't know what that is.
Like, define asynchronous.
Which turned out for like a kindergartner meant you just get to teach him that day. Mom, it's on you.
Okay, cool.
But what I think it means, and I think, well, and you'll tell us about like how you've adopted it. I think it's a really smart way of entrusting people to do their work. Also working within people's schedule, people who want downtime, people who want rest, people who have caretaking, people who have just lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's, like you said earlier, it's like not everybody's ideal thing is a Friday off, right? You got to start somewhere, but
exactly.
So talk about asynchronous.
Yeah, asynchronous, it sounds challenging, but once you get used to it, it's totally fine. I do think it makes us better prepared and better communicators, because you have to assume that not everyone is going to be communicating. And for us, it'd be like in Slack, but you have to assume not everyone is going to be communicating and in Slack at your beck and call, ready to chat with you during set hours that work, that are the same for everyone. And part of this is like asynchronous is because like we've got people on all different time zones. We have, people might have chronic illness, or people might have disabilities. People might have just childcare responsibilities, like you said. I mean, just for all different reasons, it doesn't make sense to have. We used to try to be like, you guys have to like show up on Eastern time, and it just was really hard. And so we got better at planning ahead, communicating ahead, giving people a heads up the day. It can be as simple as like the day before being like, hey, I know tomorrow you're in, everyone on our team would have like their hours, like their prefer, like people would typically choose some sort of hours that they would work, and they put them in their Slack status. And so you might message someone the day before and be like, hey, just a heads up, tomorrow I'm going to need X, Y, and Z. I know you're in the afternoon and I'm in the morning, so you can just send me that. You know what I mean? You just try to get ahead of it. You try to plan a little better. You try not to leave things to the last minute, and you just find yourself being really accommodating and flexible. And I think part of it too just comes down to this like deep mutual respect for everyone else, where you're just like, I respect, like, I get to take time to go to an appointment or to leave early or to do this or to do that. And I get to have my ideal schedule. And I like that someone else also gets to have their ideal schedule. And so that's the trade-off. And you respect that for each other. And that makes you want to be proactive in your communication and really going that whatever that extra mile is that everyone needs to go in order to make sure that things do connect and do collaborate. And of course we would have like a weekly team meeting where everyone's in the same place at the same time. But that's like once a week.
How do you feel like these changes, so the asynchronous, the 4-day work week, wherever it's kind of landed now, this version of it, how has it affected, I want to say like all of it. So I want to say like both people's satisfaction, happiness level, their output, their production, and of course, as a business owner, your bottom line. Like how, what does it look like? How has this experiment, what are the results of this experiment?
I mean, I think we have gotten, so just for context too, our company like has changed a lot in the last 6 months. Going into 2022, we had 20 full-time people. Today we have like 2.5 people. And that is by design. that is definitely like my intentional choice to restructure things. And so there's definitely like less, when you have 20 people and you have the 4-day work week and you have asynchronous and you have management, there's a lot of stuff going on that we were contending with. I feel like now with 2 or 3 people on the team, plus myself and contractors and stuff, I feel like it's almost just naturally how people operate, and we don't even think about it. Like, it's not extra work. It's not something that we have to like try to make it happen. Especially for a smaller team, it literally just feels like the most natural thing in the world. Everyone is super productive because they wake up, they're not tired, and like they wake up whenever they want. They can come in at 11 a.m. and, work whatever hours work for them, and people are rested and they're, I don't know, appreciative that I guess that they get to like do that. And I have definitely heard from people who, went on into other companies and stuff, and they're just like, wow, like you don't realize how amazing it is to have asynchronous and 4-day work week when you go to get a different job where they don't have those things. And you're just like, whoa, I totally didn't realize like just how important that is and just how different it can be. So now it just feels like, at first it took a little bit of adjusting, but now it just feels like the most natural thing. And we all just kind of show up whenever. And it's perfect for me because I struggle with the schedule. I struggle with the structure. And so it's just so great. Again, that mutual understanding of like, hey, don't expect me to like respond right away, but also I don't expect you to respond right away. And that works really well for me. That mutual expectation. So yeah, it's been great. I feel like people are productive, and there's like no world where you can ever like go back from that, You're never going to like reintroduce like schedules and regular work weeks or whatever.
And I think it was in maybe your 2022 year in review, that podcast episode where you talked about building a company that ended up where you're like, well, I'm just managing people. And I was like nodding along, listening to that, because many, many years ago, I had an agency. So I had a marketing agency. And I was like, at some point I was like, this ain't it. Like, this is not it. Where I was like, I'm hiring account coordinators and more account coordinators and interns and managers. And I was like, huh?
And then you're just an HR company all the time. And
I'm an HR company. And I'm also was very much like, I got to make sure everybody's payroll gets paid. So I'm thinking, where are the customers coming from? And so this model that I'm at now, which you helped me create, which is, this model allows me to work less than 30 hours a week, allows me to go, like my son's starting Little League, and that's apparently like a big deal. And you have to be available in the afternoons a lot. And I'm like, that's
that
easy.
Sounds like a dream.
It's like, I want to be able to, listen, we're recording this on Valentine's Day, and my daughter's school closes early on Valentine's Day because apparently it's an observed holiday. And I'm like,
that's very cute.
I know. I'm like, okay, I got that covered. And it's like, I got that covered because.
And you don't have to ask someone,
That's right. No one's covering for me.
Right.
Like,
right.
It's just,
you're not inconveniencing someone else. I think, I definitely as we grew, and I just realized like, and it's great because some people grow a bigger business with a lot of employees, and in that experience they discover a zone of genius. They never they unleash their true self, and they're I am such a brilliant man. I've had managers like that working in my company where they are truly in their zone of genius and they are living in their purpose being a manager. And I definitely realized that is not me. Like, I'm a creator, I'm a builder, I'm a maker. I want to make art and create things, and I want to get in there with my hands. And for me, getting to the point where the only thing you do is delegate and tell other people what to do, like, felt like it was holding me back from that creative expression. And so I love it. I love it for the people who get to that place and they find their purpose in that scale and in that space. That's wonderful for them. But for me, it was like, oh, there's a sweet spot. And I feel like I overshot, at least for this season in my life and this moment. And I never say never. I never say, oh, it's like, it could change. There could totally be different seasons in my life. But for right now, it was like, oh, there's a sweet spot, and I overshot it a little bit. And so then I like re-streamlined, re-simplified, and brought it back to basics a little bit.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears, and I will tell you something like I observed just knowing you, being a part of your programs. And I'm curious if this about yourself, which is,
I'm excited to learn.
Okay. So as you created new offerings, so like even now, Profit Architecture, right? Is coming out. I noticed the way that you talk about both like your programs that are in existence and the things that you're like got coming down the pipeline, even just the 4-day work week, where you're just like, these are things we're trying. You have like a self-belief that not a lot of entrepreneurs have, meaning like you're like, you come from the place and you're like, maybe I do, maybe I don't know, that you're like, this is going to work. Like, this is going to work. And especially on the client facing, I've noticed where you're like, this is going to be a game changer for our clients. This is going to work for our clients. And I feel like I noticed like in the beginning, I got tripped up too. And in launching my first course where I was like, is this good? I don't know. Like I was all like that. And I noticed like the only thing that tripped me up and made it not good was just me thinking, is this good? Is this not good? I was just in my head about it. So I wonder if like you realize, if you do realize that about yourself, like tell the people how the secret, how do you develop that muscle? Like how have you able? Yeah.
It definitely comes from years and years and years of like, so yes, I do acknowledge that I have an irrational level of self-belief, and like I've been described as relentlessly optimistic, irrationally like optimistic. Like sometimes people are like, I don't know why you think that's going to work. Like definitely been told like, that's not going to work. What are you thinking? That's never been done before. That blah, blah, blah. And so I don't know where it comes from. I wish I could give it to other people. Like if I could like transfer that to other people, that'd be like the number one best life skill.
You do that in your programs. I will say you do hold the space for, I will say like, whether it was me or another participant just being like, you could feel they're like, I don't know. You do hold the space where you're like, I fucking know. Go put it out there. Like, it's going to happen.
Give it to other people. There. I'm like, if you don't know it for yourself, you can borrow my belief in you right now and like go for it. And I do try to do that. I do definitely like want to like I guess cultivate that in other people. But it honestly, like, I wish there was a shortcut, but I think it does come from years and years and years of like you win some and you lose some. And so for years and years and years, it's like you have failures, you have flops, but you also have some big hits, and you also have. And so over the years, it's like you kind of learn like, for me, it's like a feeling. It's like, oh, I have this like tingly feeling that the right thing is happening at the right time and it's going to match up. And I can feel like the energy of this. I can feel that like the people are like it's always coinciding with people are asking me a lot of questions. And that's the other thing is like, I sometimes know things are going to be a hit because I'm not just pulling an idea out of a hat or something. Like I'm creating stuff that people have asked for, or people have asked me about, or people like, I can feel it where it's like, hey, we're getting tons of questions about XYZ. Let's create something that meets the market there. And when there's those two components, and then the component of me being excited about it, I think the biggest thing for people's sales and marketing and like getting, the success of that is your enthusiasm. It has to be genuine. You can't fake it. You can't just pretend. You have to genuinely be super, super excited about it and believe in what you're creating. And so it definitely comes from years and years and years of experience and wisdom, and like just actually living through it to the point where I can be like, yeah, I have a pretty good sense that this is going to like, I don't know. I feel like, especially with profit architecture, like one of the big things is, we don't have this is a big change for us in how we're running programs. No Zoom calls, no calls at all. We're just having a private podcast feed where there will be Q&A and like that's a private podcast feed for just the clients, where I'll answer questions that way instead of on Zoom calls. And that was something I needed to do because of my energy, some health stuff going on, all these different reasons. And after the last 3 years, I was like, the Zoom fatigue and like the screen sensitivity is so real. Like, I don't know about, I know a lot of people are having like issues with their eyes even, and like not able to look at screens as much. And there's just so much Zoom fatigue that I was like, for my personal reasons and for everyone else's health and safety, we need to not be on Zoom calls anymore as much. And so that felt like this thing where I was like, this is really aligned for me and where I'm at right now in my life and business. And I hope that other people feel that. I hope they get it. Like, I hope they don't just be like, oh, what's that? That doesn't sound as good. And it's been so interesting since we announced that shift. So many people have been messaging me being like, this was like the permission that I
That's
needed
right.
to go asynchronous in my business. And this is like such a good idea. I'm going to do this in my program. Or like, wow, I needed to see this modeled because we all get so stuck in like, well,
That's exactly what's going through my head. This is how it has to be.
This is how it is. A coaching program, it's a course, and then you have a weekly call, and then you have this, and that's what it has to look like. And I was just like, that doesn't work for me this year. So like my schedule is really unpredictable. My energy is totally unpredictable. What am I going to be able to stick to? What am I actually going to be able to commit to and do? And it's just been amazing how many people have been like, not only are they excited about that restructure of support of the program, but they're excited to implement that themselves, and they see it as like an option and a possibility for them. And so that's why I keep doing this, because I just hope, and that's the thing is like, you kind of go out on a limb and you're like, I hope that people see
there's
the
a riskiness to it, right? It doesn't mean that it's like feels warm and fuzzy and great being like, we're going to do it this way. There's a riskiness to it, and still you do it, and still we go, right?
Yeah. And still you do it. And if you start getting just those little tiny positive feedback loops, those make all the difference to me, because then it starts building where I'm like, oh, a couple people told me they were excited about this. Oh, well, this, blah, blah, blah. And then like it just starts building from there.
Oh, I love that. So, okay, you mentioned failure earlier. So talk to me about maybe earlier on in your business when things didn't go your way, and you know that low feeling. Like I feel like I've gotten pretty good at processing that, where like the first time I didn't get the amount of course signups or whatever, like it felt catastrophic, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I just am like, oh, well, what do I need to tweak? Like it just doesn't feel, but like, yeah, exactly. So for somebody that's newer, who is like, I think some of the immediate thoughts I think about some of my clients and the consultants in my world are like, they want to burn the whole thing down. This doesn't work, right? Of just like, of that initial, not meeting that initial goal, or just not having something land the way that they wanted to. So how do you handle failure, or how did you kind of way back in the day?
Yeah. I mean, and it still happens back in the day and all the time. But I think there's, you definitely get better at knowing, like kind of seeing the signs of like, hey, this isn't really like clicking, or something about this isn't quite right. So you can sometimes like course correct sooner than like going all out, but sometimes you still do. And I think what I've come to do is really start to sort of like revel in and like be all of like just kind of like basking in those like sick, sad feelings of failure, and like being really upset and feeling really like giving yourself a pity party, and just being like, and just letting myself be in that space. But also for me, the thing that's shifted is that I've become aware that for me, every time I'm at that lowest point is when something is about to click, and something that I didn't even think was a possibility is going to come from a place of pure frustration and pure just like sadness over it. I'm just so frustrated. I can't do this anymore. Those are the moments where everything cracks open and you're like, oh, I have an idea.
I think you're so right on. Yeah.
And like I describe it as like the doors are locked and the windows are closed, and you're just like, and then you just like punch through the wall, and you're like, or like punch through the ceiling, and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's no way out of this. I hate this. Everything is terrible. And then you're just like, wait a minute. And so for me, like, I think one great example of that is just when I first launched my first high ticket program, and this is in the first couple of months of 2018. So like January, February, March of 2018, those first couple months, I was doing sales calls and I was miserable. I was so anxious, upset, tired. My team was like truly worried about me. They were like, this is not good for your mental health. Like every call would end in a no. I sucked at them. I was like so bad at sales calls. It just was like clearly not for me. And so I was just so frustrated, so tired, so upset, and failing at these sales calls. And from that place, I was like, well, like I'm going to give it one shot. I'm going to try to do a group enrollment where there's not a sales call. And I'm like, I basically give up.
Yep.
So I'm not going to do a sales call. I'm going to do what I know how to do, which is a freaking webinar.
Yep.
And I'm just going to give people the link. And if they want to join, they can. And if they don't, I'm going to shut down this program and move on. That was my thought.
And I love that. It's like conventional wisdom would have been like, Mariah needs to take a consult class. Like, you know, she needs a sales, sales coach.
Like,
and you're like, what if that's not it? What if we just kill the whole,
we're so far beyond that. I was like, I can never do this again. And so, then I'm like, well, I'm just gonna, you know, it's do or die. I'm either this is gonna work by some weird, you know, possibility, or I'm just going to shut it down and move on to something else and do a different business model or whatever. And that famously did work and was like this whole start of the high ticket hybrid process and the innovation that came from that. And then of course, like, again, that first version was so messy. It was so rough. There was no plan. It was very minimum viable, but then spending years and years and years optimizing it and polishing it and turning it into what it is today became one of, I think, our biggest contributions to the space is a repeatable process for enrolling high ticket clients without sales calls. And I don't just mean like, oh, I did it once or twice in the DMs. It's like, no, I mean like a repeatable process that is structured and like actually makes sense. But yeah, so a lot of moments like that where now I can see even actually with Profit Architecture and the asynchronous private podcast support, I was like really kind of freaking out because I was like, I can't do Zoom calls anymore. Like I just can't, like, unpredictable schedule. There's a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. I can't do Zoom calls. What am I going to do? I was like, I don't know how I'm going to like figure this out. And finally came up with that idea. And so when you're in those moments of failure or just like frustration and upset and you're like, there's no way forward, I just try to allow something that is totally outside of what I could have imagined, give it a shot, see how it goes. And
I love that so much.
Be open to it.
Yes. I love that so much. When you were talking, it reminded me, I recently did this like low ticket workshop series, and on the back end, I put together like a little tripwire, and I was really bummed. I was like, no one bought. And I spent like several weeks just being like a little bit like, not boohoo, but I was like, that just sucks.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until yesterday that I was like, let me just check the fucking pages and see if, guess what? It just wasn't linked. Like there was they never saw it. And it was I'm so glad though. Like, I'm so glad because it's like, but it was such a good example of like, instead of just in that moment being like, the whole thing was a fail.
Right.
Being like,
make it mean everyone hates you and they don't like your content and they don't want to buy from you.
I should just quit.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just like, are my pages linked together? No.
Literally. Yeah. Facts, not feelings. Facts, not feelings. And that's, I mean, like, feelings matter, but when it comes to stuff like that, I've had so many people, I can't tell you the amount of times people have been like, no one's bought during my launch. And I look at their checkout page and it doesn't work. I'm like, your buy now button, it doesn't link to anything.
It doesn't do anything. That's right. That's right.
Did you even look? Like, sometimes
you're like, no, I was too busy feeling terrible.
Like, did you even look? Like, did you even try? It's so funny. I don't know what to say. But yeah, I mean, like, that's definitely happened where it's like, you think the tripwire, the thing, the
whatever
upsell is set up, and then you're like, wait, this page is redirecting? Like, what is happening?
Yes.
That's so funny.
Okay. One thing I want to ask you, so 2 final questions. Second to last one is, having taught now hundreds or thousands of students in your courses and programs, what do you feel like is the through line of the most successful ones? The ones that are like, they take the strategy, they take what you give them, the program, and they like do the damn thing. And then they do the damn thing again. Like, what's the through line? What do they have in common?
Good question. I mean, like, we always put stuff together. Like, obviously they have like a kind of like experimental mindset where they're just open to learning the lesson. Like, you're open to doing it, and you're not only doing it that, oh, this will only be worth it if I get X result. You're doing it because you love to do it. You would want to do it anyway. Like, a lot of our people who are successful, it's like they're launching programs or courses that they feel this like compulsion that like this
Yeah.
needs to exist. This is something I'm really passionate about. That obviously needs to be combined with like skill and strategy and stuff like that. But they're not just doing it where it's like, oh, unless I meet this exact result, I'm going to be so upset and I'm going to feel like this was a total waste of my time. They're more like, I'm excited to learn the lessons from this. They also understand that it is a first draft. And like, if you can just get validation, you can grow from there. Like the first high ticket program that we launched, which was the accelerator in like January of 2018, the first time we put it out there, 5 people joined. And that was a lot less money than I was used to making in my launches of my courses. So it would have been easy for me to be like, why am I doing this? But I was like, that's the validation. That's the seed. That's the first beginning stage of what this could become in the future. And so I think successful people do kind of understand that. But also there's just, I don't know. I also feel like the other thing that's just really practical is that people understand that audience building and list building and like lead, like from a practical perspective, it's
I'm glad you said
like
that.
People who don't, the people who are successful, they never stop with lead generation. And they understand that the underlying structure of their entire business is essential. Like you have to get leads and you have to get traffic and you have to get subscribers or whatever it is. Like it might be for you, depending on your program, it might be applications, it might be subscribers, it might be opt-ins, it might be traffic, whatever it is, you have to get that consistently all the time. And that's how your business grows. And I think the people who are not successful is they just, again, not successful. I don't mean to say it that way, but people who might struggle more, they like constantly are like fiddling with their sales page or fiddling with this or fiddling with that, but they're avoiding lead generation at all costs.
That's right.
They're not doing anything to grow their audience or grow their list or grow their database. And that is definitely something we see where I'm just like, if you keep ignoring, like you just keep doing the stuff over here, but like you're,
I call that like passive action and you're like tweaking like something to death.
Procrastinate action or something. Yeah. You're like branding or writing or whatever. You're doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, you just like have to go out and get subscribers, have to get leads. Like that is what feeds the funnels. And I think people are like, my funnel's not working. And I'm like, has a single person opted in? And they're like, no, I haven't promoted it anywhere. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you think is going to happen? So I just think that most successful people understand that lead generation is a never ending project. And it just has to become part of your entire business and what you do.
Love it. Okay. Last question. What is one thought that you think on purpose? And this might be kind of mind bendy, but it could be a mantra, a reframe, an affirmation. Share that with our listeners.
Yeah. Lately it's, what does equilibrium feel like for me today? And so equilibrium is a concept I came up with maybe a year or two ago. That's just like, I was definitely a person who struggled with like achievement and like my drive to achieve business success definitely came from like an unhealthy place of external validation. And I was like addicted to achievements, like the next goal and the next milestone. And
aren't we all? Yeah.
Award, right? Because and you're just like, oh, that's how I'm going to win love and adoration and acceptance, right? So like common basic, therapy stuff. But so really coming to terms with like really learning how to feel content and happy with where I'm at right now and just present in that. And so for me, equilibrium is the balance of feeling enoughness, like feeling like this is enough. I'm doing enough. I have enough. Everything's good. Like I'm content and happy right as I am. And it's the enoughness. And then on the other side of that, being open to the possibility of expansion if it feels good and if it feels like the right opportunity. So not pushing for expansion, but just being like, oh, well, that thing came along and if it all aligned, then like that, I'm open to that happening. So equilibrium for me is something that I actively choose multiple times per day because you're always hit with outside influences. Like I don't look at social media anymore, but when I do accidentally look at social media for some reason, I have to respond to a message or something. I'm just like, it throws me out of equilibrium immediately, because all of a sudden I feel like I'm not enough and I don't have enough and I'm not doing enough and I'm and you know what I mean? It's like, so you have to choose it actively multiple times per day.
That is such a great one. I'm just nodding along profusely because I'm like, yes, 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 especially the social media piece. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell everyone where to go to connect with you, go find you. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely come listen to the podcast. It's the Mariah Coz Show, and I share tons of stuff for course creators, coaches, consultants, digital product CEOs on there. The Mariah Coz Show podcast. My website is fearlessceo.co. And we have a ton of free trainings and fun stuff like that on there. So yeah, pretty much the podcast and the website are good places to start and find lots of little rabbit holes that you can get stuck into there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been even better than I imagined. Knocked it out of the park.